you caused a whole storm. I mean, it was almost great timing the way that you tweeted that and put that out today. Just take us through the timeline, if you would, that led to Gregg coming back to US men's national team coach, because it felt, I think, from the outside looking in like, okay, he's almost confirmed as Club America coach yesterday. Has this happened as a reaction to that? Is that your information, or how do you see it?
Well, I don't think it was a reaction to Club America necessarily, but certainly I think we've seen how long this timeline has lasted. And Gregg Berhalter started speaking with Matt Crocker within days of him taking over as part of the interview process. And I think as this extended and extended, these job offers were happening for multiple candidates, including Gregg Berhalter. The Club America offer was real. Gregg Berhalter was considering it. And I think U.S. Soccer recognized that, hey, if this is the guy that they believe should be back in this position, this is their top candidate, they're not going to want to lose him to a job. And, you know, again, I don't think people are denying that it had something to do directly with that, but I think we have to acknowledge that the longer this process
put pressure
went,
on.
the better chance that he was going to take another job, or someone was going to take another job.
Do you have a sense of when it will be announced?
Yes, I believe it's going to be announced tomorrow, and I think Gregg Berhalter is probably going to be here in Vegas tomorrow, and we could have an announcement as soon as then. I think there's some things that need to be finalized on the contract. You know, the dotted I's, the crossed T's. Once that happens, I think we'll see Gregg Berhalter announced as being back in this role.
Is he on the sideline on Sunday?
No, he will not be on the sideline on Sunday. And actually, from what I'm hearing, I don't know for sure that he's going to be coaching in the Gold Cup this summer either, guys, which is very interesting. I think there is an idea that they feel like they want to start the process of building out the staff, talking about the big picture for 2026, working with Matt Crocker again, and not necessarily rushing him right into a tournament. Remember, after the final on Sunday, we turn right around, go to Chicago for that Gold Cup roster training camp start. So I think they want to give the option for Gregg Berhalter to maybe start working on the big picture and allow the Gold Cup to occur with BJ Callahan still on the sideline. That's not finalized yet, but I think that could happen.
You nodded, Clint. Does that make sense to you as an approach?
Yeah, I mean, BJ Callahan has done a great job tonight. Obviously, you're going to be graded on what you do in the final, what decisions you're going to make with Destin McKinney being out. But yeah, I mean, it seems like that's the proper method that you should take, I guess. But I'm curious to what kind of deal is it going to be? Is it going to be a 2-year deal, 4-year deal, guaranteed options? Because if you don't get the job done in Copa America, I think that there's still a chance you might need to make changes.
You have any info on that, Paul?
I don't think that the final terms have been decided. I think there's still some aspects of that. I would expect that the contract would run through a World Cup. I think it would be difficult for any coach to sign a deal that's shorter term with the World Cup there. But, I mean, Clint, it's a national team coaching job. Results are always going to dictate how long that contract lasts. But I would expect that Gregg Berhalter would say, hey, if I'm coming back with the big picture for the World Cup in 2026.
But at the same time, if you're doing the deal and none of this drama happens, you have more leverage than what you have now, in my opinion. So I feel like, this is just me, that he lost a little bit of leverage in terms of the negotiation process when you were kind of let go to the side, and then now that you're coming back. Because if none of that drama happened and you're doing the deal after the World Cup, I think you have more leverage.
I think what's interesting, though, in this process is, you know, they went through a thorough interview process. They interviewed more than a dozen candidates, and we've seen some of the names. Jesse Marsch was interviewed as part of this process. Patrick Vieira was interviewed as part of this process. They were looking at coaches abroad. They were looking at American coaches. And throughout that process, from what I've been told, Gregg Berhalter kind of stood out still as the best option, the best candidate. And I think that gives him a little bit of leverage in that there was this pause that occurred, and they want to try to carry momentum forward. And if you're going to bring him back, I think you need to, if you're U.S. Soccer, you need to bring him back with confidence, and part of that is the contract that you give him.
I understand that, but at the same time, all the drama that's surrounding it and being let go for a while to figure out the situation, cleaning house, it was a mess. Would you agree?
Probably not the ideal way you want to go. I mean, I felt, and I don't know if you guys felt the same way.
That's a euphemism. Come on.
Well,
probably not the ideal way.
Yeah, I would imagine, like, look, coming out of that World Cup, there was momentum, I felt like, with this team. I know when I talked to some of the players, they felt positive about the way the tournament went. And then you paused it for 6 months. So is that an ideal way to handle a coaching search? No.
I'm curious, though, because you mentioned that they interviewed a dozen candidates, right? And you mentioned a couple, Jesse Marsch and Patrick Vieira. Do you know what the criteria is that they were judging these candidates on? What were they searching for that they felt Gregg was the best candidate of all these candidates that they interviewed?
Well, everything I was told is they were aspiring for big things in 2026. I think they wanted a coach that they felt was going to be able to advance them beyond what they did in the last World Cup. we've heard it before. They want to make the semifinals. They want to make the finals. It's a home World Cup. They felt Gregg Berhalter was somebody who could do the big picture for them, that could take them to that next level. And I think that was the starting point. What's interesting is I know a lot of the discussions with coaches was about methodology, how the playing style fit these players, what's the presentation of how you're going to use this young core, and more importantly than that, how are you going to make them grow? And so Gregg Berhalter had to look at what he did over the last 4 years and say, okay, well, what did we not do well in Qatar? We didn't score goals. How am I going to make this group better? How am I going to make them more efficient in the final third? Those are part of the process, those questions, and they felt Gregg Berhalter was the best answer to unlock the potential of this team and turn it into something more on the field.
Do you feel like this news will take the players by surprise, or is your understanding that the players had already been made aware?
I don't think that they knew this was coming. I don't think a lot of people knew it was coming.
I understand that your job is obviously to break news, so this is great from your perspective, right? But from the U.S. Soccer Federation, is that not a major fumble? Like, if you're Gio Reyna,
I think so.
You needed to be told that, surely, behind closed doors, and have the time to digest that news.
And also, I think we're taking away from the performance that these boys had tonight. That should be what we're talking about. Beating Mexico 3-0.
So you're mad that he tweeted?
Yeah, bro. Why are you messing up tonight?
Well, how else was I going to end up in the seat next to you guys here? You know?
No, I mean, it's obvious. It's great to get the news, but I still feel like it run the night in terms of we're not talking enough about the performance of these players. It was a big victory, and you know what I'm saying.
We will spend another segment talking about that.
Okay, good. I didn't know how much time we had. You know?
We got time. Don't worry. Another thing we talked about the Club America thing and whether that potentially contributed to the pressure that the U.S. Soccer Federation felt under to make a decision and make it now. Do you think that the players that we saw coming out this week are Tim Weah, Christian Pulisic, speaking out in favor of Gregg Berhalter? Do you think that also kind of added to that momentum?
Definitely. Anytime you have the leaders of the team stepping up publicly and saying, hey, we believe this guy should be back, that has to influence the leaders who are making this decision. And it wasn't just publicly that the players were making these comments. Matt Crocker met with the leadership committee of the team, Tim Ream, Walker Zimmerman, Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, and spoke with them about what they felt was the best way forward. And so they were hearing it publicly, they were hearing it privately. You know, Tim Weah just last week joined Christian Pulisic in saying he should be back. And yeah, I think when these players believe in the culture that Gregg Berhalter built, and you're talking about how can we best carry it forward, that has to factor in.
You mentioned Matt Crocker. Is your understanding that this was his decision?
He led the coaching search, and I think leaving Southampton early, getting released early from his contract, accelerated the process. Matt Crocker was the one leading it. Oguchi Onye was involved. Cindy Parlow-Cohen, JT Batson, of course, as well, leadership of U.S. Soccer, but it was Matt Crocker leading the search.
Because we had dinner with Gooch last night, and he didn't mention anything.
He didn't say a thing. He was tight-lipped, and he was tight with the wallet. He didn't reach in the alligator arms. You know what I'm saying?
There's one thing I want to revisit from the conversation that we had earlier on at halftime. I don't know if you were able to hear our halftime coverage. No. So Charlie was talking about the rehiring at halftime and pointed out that U.S. Soccer can't exactly go out there and spend outrageous money on a coach for the men's national team and not pay the head coach of the world champion women's national team in kind of somewhat parity. If I've misquoted you, you'll tell me if you think so. Is that something that you believe that U.S. Soccer has to take into federation? Is he right about that?
Well, early on in the process, I heard something similar to that. I also heard that U.S. Soccer was going to have to look at its budget and determine how much money they had to spend for those big names that we heard. I mean, guys like Jose Mourinho are making $10 million a year. It's money that we've never seen at the U.S. Soccer Federation before. I reached out to sources about it. They pushed back on that. They said, look, we know that this is a special moment, the 2026 tournament. If the right candidate is there at a very high price, we are prepared to have a discussion about meeting that price, but we're not going to get to those discussions until we feel like we have a candidate. I don't know if they ever reached out to a Jose Mourinho or a Pep Guardiola, the guys with the big salaries, but I did have multiple sources push back on me and say, we haven't made any decisions about budget, and we won't until we're looking at a candidate.
And what I will say is, there is no salary cap for a coach. There's no budget. What I'm saying is, the women fought so hard to get equity and equality within the pay scale, the facilities, the training, the travel, all of that. To go back and take steps backward after fighting for that equality and winning, to all of a sudden say, we have the world's best coach in the women's game with his salary, and we're going to, after all that, take steps backward to overpay a coach to bring him in, that's something they could not do. Because you know, I've watched the women. I was inspired by Bryce Scurry and Mia Hamm. I looked up to her. She was a striker. I watched them play. I'm a fan of it. And to see everything that they've worked so hard for, to come back down the pipeline and say, no, you know what? We gave you all this money, this equal pay. You deserved it. You earn it. You're coach. You're the best in the world. But now we're going to go and hire a men's coach to make 20 times what he makes. That makes no sense. That's what I'm saying. You want to be leaders in the game, integrity, and hold that. You would be backtracking on your word. Everything that you've done to support the women's game, you can't go out and all of a sudden say, we're going to pay the new men's coach an exuberant amount of money when you have the world's best coach in the women's game making a certain amount of money. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just curious. I mean, Kate kind of alluded to it earlier about when she introduced Gio to, when you were asking about if the player has been told prior to this that he was coming back. I'm curious if you have any information on where that relationship stands between Gio and Gregg and that whole dynamic. Obviously, we saw how it played out from our standpoint in the public, but if you have any information on where that currently stands, have there been conversations between those two, the families, any of that, just what that current situation looks like?
I don't know whether or not Gregg Berhalter has spoken to Gio Reyna or Claudio Reyna or Danielle Reyna. I don't know what the communication has looked like, but I will say this. We have to acknowledge that one of the first things Gregg Berhalter is going to have to do is sit down with Gio Reyna and clear the air, have a discussion, because it's going to be very difficult if you don't do that. It's going to hang over the locker room. It's going to hang over the group. Gio Reyna is one of the top young players in this program. He's going to be a part of winning games for this national team going into 2026. And we know what happened after the World Cup and during the World Cup. So Gregg Berhalter is going to have to take that head on. I don't know how soon that would happen, but I think it probably has to be one of the first things on the agenda for Gregg Berhalter.
I mean, with this hiring, right, the Gio Reyna in the starting lineup or not in the starting lineup, that narrative now is forever complicated, is it not?
No, I mean, there's no complication at all.
It will
Gio's got to
always be a
play.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm
Gio's
saying
got to start.
But if he doesn't play, if for whatever reason Gregg decides that he doesn't play, automatically the first reaction from everyone is going to be, well, he just had this performance tonight, right? And let's say he continues his performance like that in the final. They go on and win it.
It takes
doesn't
time
play
to get past that situation.
I'm just saying. That's why I'm keep plugging at. Has there been some kind of conversation or what that relationship stands, where it stands? Because we were kind of talking about that earlier. You know, if he doesn't play him, the first reaction is going to be, it's not because of form.
Mo, you don't think he's having that conversation before they hire him? You're not going to think Matt Crocker is going to sit there and say, Gregg, we know all this happened. Gio's one of the most talented players on this team. If you're going to have any type of resentment towards him because of his family and how this thing went down in the World Cup, then this is probably not the right decision for you.
Okay, but does he now feel obligated then? Does he now feel obligated to put him in his starting lineup?
I think he feels obligated with the quality that he showed tonight, especially.
But the thing about it, too, is, sorry, I was just going to say, it's a two-way streak, right? Like, we're sitting here saying that Gregg has to be willing to try to mend things with Gio.
Right.
What if Gio's saying, nah, bro, like, no. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm not saying that's the situation. I'm playing devil's advocate in this scenario, but I just think that's in a dynamic I'm curious to know more about, because I think it has a significant impact on Gregg accomplishing everything that you just laid out there in terms of what they were searching for out of a manager, and for this team to ultimately have success. Because I agree with you, Gio needs to play. What he did today, I mean, come on.
Yeah, let's take the off-the-field stuff off the table and just focus on the field stuff. The situation has always been, are you fit enough that you can play? You know what I'm saying? Can you play regularly throughout a season and show that you're not going to get injured? And that was the issue going into the World Cup, because it was like minutes. How many minutes are you going to get? And how you manage a player like that to say, hey, get the arm around him a little bit and say, hey, if you can show in training that you're working hard and that you're fit, then you'll get time. But to say, hey, you ain't going to play, probably ain't going to play at all. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what happened with that situation, but the only thing you can control is on the field stuff. And the only thing Gio can do is go out there and ball and show that he needs to be out there. And in terms of the Berhalter situation, the only thing that I worried about with the issue was the in-locker room stuff getting on the outside and feeling like you lost the locker room. But when you talk about all the people who supported him, it shows, like in the team, that they felt that they still had trust in him and that the locker room was not lost. So I'm looking forward to see how it all plays out. I'm rooting for him, but it's going to be a crazy story.
You're rooting for him. Would he have been your pick?
It's one of those things, you're innocent until proven guilty. So why would you take him away? And then all of a sudden bring him back?
Is that yes, he would have been your pick?
This is what I said at the World Cup. I'm gonna be real with y'all. I'm gonna keep it 100 because I'm gonna say what I said then. I said let him stay on because he got the team to qualify for the World Cup. He got out of the group. He was out coached against Holland. But how are you going to do in the Concacaf Nations League games? How are you going to do in Copa America? And if you do a great job, keep it going. If you don't do a great job, who's next? That's how I'd have played it.
Would it have been your pick?
So
Why you keep putting the mic down like?
it's a mic drop moment for him. Every time he talks, it's a mic drop moment.
He's done.